Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. Well, this was a weird one.
Yeah. Very strange.
So the premise of this movie was you have all these people just like randomly killing people, and then when they interview them afterwards, they go, "Because God told me to," and then they look dramatically at the camera. I feel like every time we watch one of these movies and there's something bad in it, we should just be like, "The list told me to."
Yeah.
Equally damaging to society at this point.
Yeah, we'll kind of get into that on this episode because it's sadly more relevant now than I think it is when it was 1970 when the movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yeah, and I think that this was actually one of the more interesting movies from a story perspective of the ones that we watched so far. It definitely turned into not the movie that I thought it was going to be as it was going on.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, I'll introduce it and then we can get into all that. In 1976, writer and director Larry Cohen released his religious/sci-fi/horror movie, God Told Me To. This movie follows a detective named Peter who investigates a series of killings by seemingly stable people who claim afterwards that they murdered because God told them to. It only gets weirder from there. This movie did so poorly in the box office originally that it was later re-released with the title Demon. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Very good. I really only have one fact about this movie.
Okay.
It's not like this is a, I don't know, not a huge following, I don't believe, but the only one that I found, I mean there's multiple like on IMDb, but the only one I found interesting was that Larry Cohen didn't have a permit to film the St. Patrick's Day Parade, but he filmed it anyway.
Oh.
So that's the actual St. Patrick's Day Parade, but he didn't have a permit to do it.
Interesting.
Which is kind of strange, but...
Yeah.
Well, so he filmed... I assume the way it went was he filmed parts of the parade.
Well, sure, yeah.
And sliced it. Yeah, sliced it in. Yep.
Yeah, I doubt anyone actually ran into the St. Patrick's Day Parade and started shooting a gun that made people bleed red paint.
You don't know that, man. It was the 70s.
70s were a different time. Cocaine was flowing. It was...
They were, yeah.
Yeah, so this movie was very much, I feel like, a product of the 70s in the way that it was made. It definitely had a lot of elements that maybe like late 60s, early 70s movies did as far as like sort of the production and vibe. And in the very beginning of it, when they were showing just like scenes of the city and playing the music, it really reminded me of one of like the old Sean Connery James Bond movies. Like, as far as the camera quality and the way that they were kind of doing the shots and the music of it, it really felt like that. And so I was kind of in the beginning expecting more of like, sort of an intrigue, thriller type movie, which I guess it kind of did a little bit. But then another thing I had in my notes about just kind of the general feel of the movie was it kind of reminded me of Psycho in some places.
Oh, okay.
Like the way the dialogue was, and especially that scene where he's going up the stairs trying to meet Bernard's mother, and she comes at him with the knife, and they're like fighting, and it's kind of dark, and just the music and everything with that. It reminded me of those scenes like in Psycho where they're sitting just in like that. I guess it was like a dining room with all the animal heads on the wall talking. Anyway. Vibe felt similar. And then I also noticed that they did towards the end that thing on his eyes that they did in Dracula, where it's like the whole face is in shadow, but just the eyes are in like that band of light.
Just eyes, yeah.
So I kind of wondered if maybe Larry Cohen was like a fan of the old school horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
Because it seemed like there were some elements that he used.
Yeah, I mean, you would think he would absolutely have to be, just based off of like some of his other movies that he's put out.
I didn't really look at it. What else has he done?
So he's put up, like, as far as like what he's directed, wrote, and produced, he's put up like Hell in Harlem, Black Caesar. Let's see, It's Alive. Sorry, It's Alive, Island of the Alive, A Return to Salem's Lot, Maniac Cop 2, like just movies that, like Body Snatchers. He wrote the story for that, so he's definitely been involved with horror genre for a while, so he's definitely had to have but
it also, one thing that stood out to me about this one too was just how it was shot. Like every scene had a bunch of cameras in it. And I feel like one thing we've talked about with some of the other movies on this list, especially the older ones, is that they had like one camera that was set up in, the edge of the shot, and it just like followed people back and forth. But this one definitely had those like cuts to different angles. And one place that really stood out was when Peter was climbing the water tower in the beginning, and there were just like several different views of him in that same position, all cut together. So you got more of like the panorama type look. And I thought that was interesting just because it was like such a very different, like such a contrasting thing to what we've talked about with a lot of the older movies so far. So it seemed like Larry had a budget.
Yeah, that was the thing. I started this movie and I was really excited because it was done in the 70s, and I don't know, I was just kind of excited. I thought it was gonna be interesting. But I definitely noticed that the directing went a total different style than what I'm used to as far as 70s movies goes. But I wasn't like upset with it. It was just like, oh, okay, this is like trying to be different than what's going on at that time. Like the camera was shaky at times, and like while they were filming like a news section and just all that, and it was like, well, that's actually pretty interesting, because a lot of movies do that now, especially with the found footage style, like it's real shaky and stuff. And
I noticed they kind of worked some of that type of stuff in there at the beginning. But and the only other thing I had really about like the production of it, it had some serious audio mixing issues. Like the dialogue was super uneven and just completely drowned out by the background music a lot of times. But another thing I noticed was that for some reason the like sound effects that they mixed in, the Foley, was super like selective and loud. So if you watch, every time Peter walks, you can hear it over literally everything else that's happening, like the sound of his shoes like hitting the pavement.
I guess I didn't notice that. Yeah, that's crazy.
But like, so there's like music and there's other stuff going on. There may be like a crowd running, or there may be cars and traffic and everything else, and you can't understand what anyone's saying, but you just hear that click, click, click as he's walking, because they've clearly like added that after the fact. Which it cracked me up, because once I noticed it, I couldn't like not notice it. But another thing I couldn't not notice was just how much hair was in this movie. I thought Peter's chest was hairy, but then I saw his girlfriend's arms. My God. The 70s were a different time.
They're just hairy, man.
She could have braided that.
All natural, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. Also, I had Peter, while we're on Peter's love life, his wife kind of looked like Steve Buscemi in a wig.
So his wife was the one with the brown hair?
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that.
The one that looks like Steve Buscemi in a wig.
Yeah, the one. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's great.
I probably shouldn't have said that, but I couldn't help myself because God told me to.
Hey.
But yeah, so anyway, production aside.
Her name was Martha.
I have a question for you.
She definitely does look like Steve Buscemi.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, she died in 1992, man.
Steve Buscemi's still alive. So
true.
if they made a sequel, he could just put on a wig.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you.
Yeah.
What type of horror would you call this?
I don't think I would call it horror. I think it's more of a science fiction film.
Yeah, I think so too. And when it started, I definitely thought it was going to be like religious horror. Like I was expecting something sort of resolving in the way of like The Exorcist. Because you had all these random killings of people saying God told them to, and then you have like the detective who is super Catholic. And I was like, this is all setting up for some sort of like demon battle. And as the movie went along, we found out that really it wasn't anything to do with the religious supernatural world. It was more aliens. And that is just a kind of a different type of horror. And then the story, I mean, it definitely felt like a sci-fi novel. Like an old school sci-fi novel is what the script of this felt like to me.
Yeah, and and I think like it had one, not just one, but there was one scene specifically that had like kind of had a horror quality to it that kind of would have stood out.
Yep.
And that was when the black gang member or drug dealer
Yes.
stabbed the cop, and
Mm-hmm.
he was using the excuse of God told me to do that. It was like, well, that's like realistic. Like that's actually what would happen in real life if this kind of stuff was going on. Like someone would use that as an excuse to kill. So that was like actually kind of scary. But yeah, I would see it more as sci-fi because of the ending. But like it's also kind of realistic to the stuff that's going on now with
How so?
all the shoot. Well, I mean, as far as like
saying.
the shootings go and stuff like that. I mean, like the killings. Like this kind of stuff is more common nowadays than it was in the 70s.
Well, I did feel like there were some like horror scenes in this. I mean, like the opening, the mass shooting to start with. Like that was terrifying. Just the idea of somebody up above and
Right. Yeah.
you don't know where it's coming from and everybody's trying to get away and then people are randomly getting shot. But then also when Peter goes to see Bernard Phillips' mother and she attacks him with the knife in the stairwell, I mean that was intense. And then the one that really kind of unsettled me though was that interview with the blonde guy talking about killing his family, and the way he was just so like matter of fact about it. It was so creepy and so disturbing for him to just sit there and like very casually talk about like tricking his daughter into coming out of the locked room so that he could shoot her. Like that just made my skin crawl. It was well acted and well pulled off, and the content was just like ugh.
Yeah. And then I think throwing in the ending, as what happened to his mother and all that, that's what kind of turned it sci-fi. Like I think if they kept going with the whole like just a whole bunch of people thinking that they're being told by God to kill people, like that's a little bit more horror, related.
Yeah, and this movie definitely felt like two movies to me. Like the first half, and then there's the part where, because it starts off as like investigation, right? And so you have Peter and all of these like random killings where everybody is having exactly the same reasoning afterwards, even though they don't know each other and are in different parts of the city. And he's kind of piecing it together, and you also are trying to kind of piece together and figure out what's going on. And he finds out about what was the guy's name, Bernard Phillips, and is going to go like investigate there. And so you're starting to think, all right, well, there's something going on with that. And then all of a sudden it cuts to like this boardroom where there's a bunch of rich looking old white guys who were talking about how that's actually a thing I've started trying to do more is anytime I talk about a person that's white, I want to refer to them as a white guy, because so many people only add the race if it's not white, that I feel like when you add white it makes people uncomfortable. So if you're like, oh yeah, how are things, when you got your tire repaired, I'll be like, oh yeah, there was a real nice white guy working there, he took good care of me.
That's okay.
Anyway, so I'm gonna start.
I'm on board.
Anyway, boardroom full of old, rich-looking white guys were sitting there, and they are talking about like the killings and about like, oh yeah, God is, or they say he is making, you know, himself more known. Like the violence on a large scale will get way more attention than like outreach or whatever. And all of a sudden you realize like, oh, someone knows what's going on. Like there's a larger thing happening here. And then that almost picks up like a separate storyline. Like to me, that felt like where the movie became more about the sci-fi storyline and less about sort of the investigation and the horror that were in the first half.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think it, for me, for me, I think like the cutaway scene of the girl who got abducted, so the detective's mom.
Yeah.
Like I think that, like I thought that was actually shot like totally different film wise than
it was.
And it almost looked more super modern. Like I mean, as far as like the, you know, the quality, it was just like, oh wait, that's kind of crazy for, you know, 70s. But I think once you kind of threw in that, you know, that cutaway and saw that, it was just like you kind of had a feeling of, you know, where the movie was going. But that being said, I think they were able to kind of stick it out and help the viewer slowly figure these things out as the movie went on, to which, you know, the final little battle, you know, was fun. Everything was good.
Yeah, and speaking of that scene, so I feel like Larry definitely has a favorite part of the female anatomy.
Yeah, I know, man. Yeah.
Like I bet that dude's whole house is Georgia O'Keeffe flower paintings. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it was like, and of course, you know, I watched this by myself late, and I was like, what was that? What did that?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that was kind of funny.
But yeah, when Bernard's mom, like in the flashback, was describing her abduction, the way that she talked about it sounded so much like Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I was just waiting for, you know, the big top to open up or something.
Waiting for the intro music to play.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they have that flashback and she explains what happened, and then you find out, okay, well, this Bernard person is clearly sort of connected to all of this somehow. And then you realize, okay, well, his mom got pregnant, but she had never had sex, and it happened after she was on this alien ship, even though she didn't see anyone or anything. And so you're like, all right, well, the guy is part of what's going on. And so the investigation kind of continues that direction. And so the reason I keep stumbling on Bernard's name is because I had to scroll back down on my notes to find it, because in most of my notes I just called him Buffalo Bill. Because there's that scene where Peter finds himself down in the basement with that guy, and I could just imagine him saying everything that Buffalo Bill said in that movie. But
puts the lotion on the kid.
Yeah,
he gets the hose again.
But yes,
this movie also had Andy Kaufman in it, which he's you know, one of my favorite people of he's one of my favorite white people of all time.
There you go.
But he was playing a serious role, and I had no idea that he was in this movie. Now, I say it's not like I'm obsessed with him. I don't know, you know, everything he's done, but I was like, oh my god, that's Andy Kaufman. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even catch that. But.
Yeah, he was the police officer that started shooting people at the parade.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very young version of him. But.
Yeah. I think he was in his 20s for sure. Yeah, probably like 25.
Yeah. Also, this is kind of random, but there was that science writer that Peter went to talk to, and he's like, no, out of chaos comes reason, and out of reason comes science. And I'm pretty sure that's like the opposite of how life works. like, you know, like, yeah, all of the catastrophes that started the Dark Ages were really a big scientific breakthrough. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, coming out of the Black Plague in Europe, we had a real renaissance of scientific discovery.
Right.
But yeah, so Peter, you know, is going through, he's making these discoveries, and he decides that he wants to get the word out that all of these people are claiming to be motivated by God, which the police didn't want him to do. But to me, that happened so abruptly. Where like 1 minute he's one of the cops and he's on their side, he's doing the investigation like the way he should be, and then like 10 minutes later he's like going to the press, and then they're like out looking for him. Like it was just such a weird. I felt like they could have like built up the tension between him and the rest of the force throughout the investigation,
Right.
so that it didn't feel just so like, and the switch is flipped and now everybody's role is reversed and it's weird. It's the pacing wasn't always like super on point in this movie, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, even as far as like the beginning of the movie, it's like, oh, okay, there's action, like boom, 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 just action, 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 and it's like, oh wait, it has to slow down. It's a movie, so it's gonna slow down. But yeah, it did seem like just from how it got to point A to point B, the end of the movie was just like, wait, what? In a short amount of time too, an hour to 30 minutes. So it was like trying to throw in a lot of stuff, to
yeah, for sure. And I don't know, I think that this one had a lot of story to it, and so trying to get that out but also have like compelling scenes was kind of a difficult balance. And the big reveal is when you realize that Peter also is the product of an alien abduction, and so his mom was also abducted and then became pregnant even though she'd never had sex, and then she put him up for adoption, and then he went through like the Catholic adoption system, I guess, and never knew his background or his mom, and then he grew up to have a wife and a girlfriend, and then he he realizes what he is. He is able to detect his way into realizing that he is like a creature like Bernard.
Right.
And apparently aliens are coming, abducting women, getting them pregnant. The offspring is meant to like spread, I guess, on the earth or something. But that was another piece of the story I couldn't quite figure out, was how did all of those old white guys fall under Bernard's influence? Like, they were talking about how, like, yeah, we all just knew to come here and they felt like they were being controlled. But how did they even get in touch with him in the first place? And why was their understanding that he was a religious figure? Like that, I don't know. Something about that I felt like went very unexplained, and there were some big leaps as far as like how it all really fit together.
Well, so like with Philip, like his and Peter's powers were different. So
yes.
So Peter's was more human, more human power, which is why he didn't realize, I guess, what he had until the end. Whereas, with Bernard's, it was, I assume, more extraterrestrial. I could say that word. I'm just not going to. But that being said, it just confused the hell out of me. It was just like, wait, what? Like, what is going on? Like you have a vagina too?
Well, so like broad brush, Peter's investigating because all these people are killing. You come to find out that Bernard is causing these people, like he's the one sort of using his mind to control them to go do these things, and they're processing it as like inspiration from God or through a religious filter. As Peter is investigating, he is also looking at things that way because he is a strict Catholic. You eventually find out that Bernard is an alien, that his mom was impregnated by some unseen alien force, and he has these powers, and he is using them, I guess, maybe to like get Peter's attention. Like maybe that was the big goal behind all of it, was to do enough to lead Peter to him, or it was just to, I don't know, get more people under his influence or something. But then when Peter finds him, he seems very aware of Peter and of his power and that he's different, and then wants to reproduce with him and make more of them because they're supposed to be there to spread or something. And then Peter doesn't want any of that. So he embraces his power, but doesn't embrace, I guess, the larger mission of the aliens, and then just allows himself to be locked up in the end. So that's kind of the overarching story of it. And I think that, we've talked a lot of times about some movies are meant to be horror just to scare you. Like, the experience of the movie is going to be frightened. And then there are movies where they're using horror elements to tell a different story. And I feel like this one definitely fell more into that second one.
Yeah. So that's exactly why I kind of got lost. But it definitely, like, I think you clearing that up as far as your, broad brush, it kind of helped clear it up. Now, at the end, when he responds, God told me to, like, he was being kind of like ornery, right?
Yes, yeah, okay, for
Yeah.
sure. But I called that, like, so there's the scene where they're talking about how religious Peter is, like the wife or somebody's talking. I think it actually was the girlfriend when she's being interviewed by the police, and she's talking about like how he goes to mass every morning or whatever. I looked at Sarah and I was like, this movie's going to end with him looking at the camera and saying, God told me to. Oh, and she's like, yeah. And I'm like, calling it right now. That is 100% what this is setting up for. Now, I thought the way that it would get there would be very different. I was thinking that he would go down like a super, like, hyper-religious road in trying to battle whatever evil, and then he would end up, like, basically becoming delusional and getting into the same way of thinking that all the people were. But anyway, that happened, and I called it, and I want credit.
I'll give you the credit, man.
Thank you. That's all I need.
And also, I mean, like, he's going to, a state hospital for the criminally insane, but, like, that's not that bad. Right?
I mean, the part that was confusing to me about that, and so my favorite scene in the movie was when he goes and confronts the gang, because there was the drug dealer who had killed the crooked cop, and then I guess Peter ostensibly was going to get revenge for that, even though he wasn't really friends with the cops anymore or something. But anyway, so he goes into that bar, and there's like the gang there, and the guy comes at him with the knife, and then Peter has realized, what he is and is able to use his powers and makes the guy like stab himself. Just like takes them all out with his brain, basically.
Right.
And that I thought was a really cool horror scene. That felt, like Carrie or, something like that. But it was really anticlimactic to go from that to, now I'm just letting myself be arrested.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie definitely gets you thinking, man.
Yeah. A thing that got me thinking was, he's like, well, I got to say goodbye to my wife and my girlfriend. And it'd really save me some Uber fare if they were just in the same house while I did it.
Yes, yeah. I was like, how are they getting along so well?
Well, I mean, man looking like that, you don't argue. You take what you can.
I guess so. Maybe it had something to do with his powers.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, then he goes back to Dee Snider's apartment, and then he gets explained that like Peter is too human to let go and accept who he really is, and then so then his brother, or not really brother, but like the other alien, Bernard, lifts up his shirt and shows off that Georgia O'Keeffe flower on his rib cage and tells Peter that like, oh, it's meant to be, and then Peter slaps him, and then like he realizes that it hurts. So then like they can fight, and like Peter is able to hurt him in ways that normal humans can't. Eventually like strangles him, the building collapses and catches on fire for some reason. But that was kind of like the big battle scene, and I think from a story perspective that was important, because it was like, hey, I am accepting what I am, but I'm not accepting the path that seems to be created for me. And so I thought that like that overall message was kind of interesting, but I really, really would have liked it a lot more if the movie had gone in the direction of, now he has to find out what to do, or he's going to go find other aliens to fight, or, like some kind of ongoing thing, not just like, well, I killed my sister brother, time to go get locked up.
Yeah.
Like, I would watch a movie of, if this was just like prequel, and then there was a movie just about him like fighting aliens with his brain powers. That I think would be a better movie.
Should have wrote that in, man.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe
I think it was kind of weak. I mean, I think it was him showing like, he's the good. The good in him is allowing him to be arrested, so he's not taking his power and using it for evil.
Well,
right.
He could use his power for good, right? I mean, like, that's what you do as a cop. Carry a gun.
We're gonna bring up police in this conversation.
No,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, but yeah, we should work on a sequel to this.
Yeah.
We could. Carl Winslow would be a good retired cop.
I love him.
Obviously, we get Steve Buscemi.
Yeah.
But then who would play like old Peter?
Hold on. Let me think about it.
Dude, what if we got Jeff Goldblum?
That'd be pretty great.
Could you imagine?
I was thinking like Adam Sandler. We're not making this a comedy?
No, this is serious business.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I go for Jeff Goldblum then.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
That's funny. But I mean, I'm pretty sure the main actor Tony Lo Bianco is still alive. He's not dead yet.
Yeah, but I don't feel like... I feel like he would be too old to play
he got married in 2015, so no.
Oh. Well, how many times has he been married? And how many girlfriends
3.
does he have?
Probably 8.
Yeah.
You're a hunk like that, Daniel. That's not our category of hunks.
That's
true. We don't know what that's like.
Well, but that's what I'm saying.
We're
is
a
like,
one-wife hunk.
Why would he make a movie with us when he could just be out, getting rug burns from his girlfriend's arm hair?
That's a good call. Yep. Yeah, I think overall, if I had to rate this movie, I would rate it. I wish this was the movie Death Wish if I'm going to watch a movie from the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board with that. This one, it definitely had some... It reminded me of Blood and Black Lace, where we talked about how there are scenes that are good. Like, there are scenes that are set up well, they're decent horror scenes. But the way that it was overall strung together and executed was not at a high level. And it wasn't a movie that I felt like on the edge of my seat. It was very uneven as far as pace. And the story was convoluted enough that it was hard to really like get into the flow of it. So I would put it kind of down in that area of the list, sort of our bottom tier as far as scary goes. Even though there were a few scenes that I thought were decent. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's more, I think it's scary because of, the time we're living in now. But once they kind of threw in the whole sci-fi aspect, it like they totally get credit.
Yeah, and I forgot that you hate that, so you probably weren't.
It's not that I hate that. I think it's just not scary. Like it's just like it's a different category for me. But I think they get more credit because of like trying to change it up and do that, and also they only made it an hour and 30 minutes and didn't make it 3 hours.
Bless them. Thank you, Larry.
So I think for me, it's like, okay, well, the realistic part of that, like the shootings and stuff like that, that's legit scary.
Yeah.
The killings and stabbings and all that, like that's intense. And then it went the sci-fi route, and he was trying to do something that, I hadn't heard of before. Not that it hasn't been done before. So I give him major credit for that, for going his own path. But as far as scariest movies of all time, yeah, it's low on the list. I'm gonna put it in front of. I'm gonna say it's more scary than Under the Skin because that was an awful movie.
Yeah, fair. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I swear I will fight him, dude. Like, it's like, I don't care. You're not Larry, man.
Yeah.
Larry's the good neighbor.
Yeah.